Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got the whole crew with us, Kipp Adams and Wolk, on this Tuesday afternoon. We are coming off the Super Bowl high on Sunday, which was a very successful Sunday for several Bulldogs. Got 6 Bulldogs who, when it all said and done, can call themselves Super Bowl champs. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk about the Georgia offseason moving right along. We are not really that far away from the start of spring practice. Talk about Georgia basketball. Their NCAA tournament hopes with, I want to say, 7 regular season games to go. We will preview Georgia baseball. Our new writer, Olivia Sayer, popped on and gave us the breakdown of the Diamond Dogs head of the season. And then we'll preview what we got coming up on Thursday, something I am very excited for. But, fellas, let's start with the Super Bowl, a very successful day for the Philadelphia Eagles. They beat the Kansas City Chiefs 40-22. Just want to point out, Kipp, Ben and I went with the Eagles, and that wound up being a very productive pick. The Eagles, really the story of the game, that defensive front, 6 sacks, just a very productive day. Of the Georgia players who played in the game, Jordan Davis was actually the only one to record any statistics. 2 tackles, had one of those 6 sacks, but a very productive day nonetheless for Jordan Davis as well as Jalen Carter. I'm going to start with you, Ben. What did you think of the Super Bowl and specifically what those Georgia players did to help the Eagles get the job done?
Well, I'm actually going to add a statistic that I do think that they contributed in a little bit as well. 10 quarterback hurries in the game. 5 of them were Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, and Nolan Smith. I believe Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith had 2 apiece. Jordan Davis had 1. That was the story of that football game. Like, whether they were accumulating the stats or whether it was Josh Sweat or whether it was because of the panic that Patrick Mahomes seemed to be in the entire game, that Cooper DeJean's making great plays that are flipping the game on its head. That pass rush with them not having to blitz. I think I saw a statistic that they only blitzed 1 time, and it was on a play that ended up not happening because of a penalty. They rushed 4 the entire game, and when you've got a defensive front like what they brought in through Georgia, more or less, I think that you got to give a lot of credit to, the Georgia guys up front and what they did. And I think that ultimately that was the difference in why the Eagles were, I hate to be hyperbolic and feel like I'm living in the moment, but an all-time defense. Like, I feel like you're going to have, when you look back at what they did analytically, defensively, they're going to be looked at as one of the best defenses in the history of the NFL. And I think that, that defensive front is the reason why.
Yeah, we talked about those Bulldogs. Now, not all of these guys played, but you're talking about a group of former Bulldogs: Nolan Smith, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Nakobe Dean, who was hurt, Lewis Seen, and Keely Ringo. I mean, those guys all will have an opportunity to have Super Bowl rings as a result of Sunday's game. Kipp, what did you think specifically of the Dogs on the field, what they did, and being able to beat the dynasty, the current dynasty of NFL football, the team that had a chance to go for the 3-peat, but were stopped by some familiar faces for the folks in Athens?
Yeah, I will start by acknowledging that, kind of similar to last season's Georgia team, there were signs from this Chiefs team that they just weren't as dominant as they had been in years past. Patrick Mahomes was not playing with the same, offensive weapons around him, never really able to get a run game going. Travis Kelce, outstanding career, but I don't think he would say he's the same kind of player he had been during their other Super Bowl wins. So to your credit, yes, I think you guys made the correct prediction. Obviously, in hindsight, I should have seen that this Philadelphia Eagles team, similar to, the way Ohio State was playing going into the national championship, they were just playing more dominant football during their postseason run. I will point out that the Falcons should be 2-0 against these teams. They went 1-1, but, we're not going to get into a pass interference phantom call that never happened, that should have happened. And so just even more frustrating seeing these two teams knowing how well the Falcons could play. But as for the Georgia players, I think just Jalen Hurts said it best after the game. He credited the Georgia background, specifically on defense, because they have 6 players on on their defense that played at Georgia. All of them at least won one national championship. And Jalen Hurts, the fact that he brings up that it starts with Nakobe Dean, a guy who was not even on the field for the Super Bowl, just saying that these guys brought their culture to the Eagles team. He credited them as having a big impact, just how they play together and how that impacted the other parts of that team, knowing that, you play 3, 4, maybe 5 years at Georgia. For these guys, it should be just a fraction of their overall football career, but it does show you the kind of impact that can have, and just the impact that it had on a Super Bowl winning team. And everyone talks about how this was just a huge billboard for Georgia. But I just think the fact that Jalen Hurts brought that up on his own and just, mentioned that Nakobe Dean, a guy, again, that not out there playing, but just all of them bringing that into the locker room, for all the, the opinions and the think pieces that were out there written about Georgia over the last, I guess, 18 months, wondering about the culture in Athens. I think that was a clear indicator that Kirby Smart instilled the correct culture, that you can have that kind of impact on a player that now is being talked about. With Jalen Hurts, his whole career trajectory has changed now. Having a Super Bowl championship, just quieting all the doubters out there, having multiple dominant seasons, having gone the 2 Super Bowls already, that he can say, yeah, these guys from Georgia just had this huge impact on our team and helped us. It just is a reminder that I think that they're built to handle adversity, and they carry that to the next level. And just seeing Nolan Smith, he's a guy that's just so easy to root for. And the fact that he came into his own in this postseason play and had such a huge impact, he set up for just a huge breakthrough season next year. But I just think overall that it was a billboard for Georgia, but it was also a reminder that, I think Kirby Smart built his program the way that every single college coach would tell you. That is the blueprint for how we would want to build our program moving forward.
And Kipp, if you need a little bit of a pick me up for your Falcons side of things, I know it's not easy sometimes, but if you really look at the Eagles season, they didn't have Jalen Hurts at the end of their game where they're up 14, lose to the Commanders. They didn't have AJ Brown for, I can't remember who it was they were playing, but the other game that they lost, it's like they really lost to one team all season long. And it was your Atlanta Falcons, our Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, that gives me just a small amount of solace knowing that that Eagles team, one, I still hate the Eagles, but two, they have made it to the mountaintop that I don't think I need to set aside any expectations of getting to where the Eagles are now, because their franchises run in a completely different way. And I think that was basically the echo chamber that we saw, on social media over the last 2 days, was just everyone looking at that roster and not just the Georgia players, guys from Alabama as well, just seeing the impact that these guys had, and and knowing that the Falcons have none of those players. They chose to not select any of them. The fact that they've only chosen, I think, a dozen Georgia players over the last 50 years, it's still mind-blowing, and I defend them more than I need to, because you can't just pick a player because of the helmet, but the helmet should make the eval easier. And I think the Eagles, it became how are they getting all of these guys? And now you're seeing just the fact that the league let them build this type of defense. So when they have all these free agents, they have all these young guys. They have evaluated properly, and I just think it's a credit overall. I have to just acknowledge that the Eagles franchise is run the way that I could only dream of the Falcons being run.
I wanted to shout out one of my childhood friends. My buddy Connor is a huge Eagles fan, and I texted him after the game and said, "Hey, congratulations!" And he's like, "Hey, I'm looking forward to one day being able to text you, after the Falcons win." And I said, "Keep waiting on that one." But I wanted to bring up a point too, real quick, before we talk about Nolan Smith. What Kipp was talking about the way the Eagles evaluate guys. The thing that keeps coming back to mind, even over these last couple of years, is going back to when Nolan Smith was drafted. If you guys remember, there's a clip of Howie Roseman, the Eagles GM, on the phone with Nolan after they've picked him. And Howie Roseman went to Florida, and I'm paraphrasing, but he's telling Nolan, like, man, I hate picking you Georgia guys. I'm a Florida guy, drafting all these Georgia guys. And Nolan just laughs and he goes, but you want to win. And I just feel like that just sums up this Eagles run. It's like that they have evaluated, and it's so funny, like people bringing up those experts in Philadelphia looking at Georgia just wrecking shop on defense and saying, hey, let's just take that defense. And as simple as that sounds, that's a huge part of why the Eagles are where they are right now. All right, guys, I wanted to talk about Nolan Smith because, again, he didn't record any tackles in that game, but just the end of a fantastic postseason run. He had a chance for it to be historic if he would have gotten a sack in that Super Bowl. Didn't happen, but I wanted to pull up this clip. For those watching on YouTube, if you're listening, I would really recommend you pop on just to watch this. This was from Coach Dan Casey on Twitter, of Nolan Smith just absolutely obliterating the pulling guard on this play in the Super Bowl, coming off the end there, number 3. I feel like no one took a bigger step forward during this postseason run than Nolan Smith. I was super impressed. That first year with the Eagles, he was really quiet. Kind of thought, it was taking him some time to get his feet under him. But I don't know if you feel the same way, Kipp, but I feel like the sky is the limit for Nolan right now after this postseason run.
Yeah, and the fact that you talked about how close he was to, having a playoff record, but there's never a moment where he's not playing assignment football. He's not worried about the stats. He's doing exactly what he's told. And when he's blowing these guys up in the backfield, he's allowing the other players to get one-on-one or just free run at Patrick Mahomes. And that's why they were able to get 6.5 sacks and just, hurry him the entire game. And I think, they didn't do that to everyone last season, which is why the playoff run for Nolan is really sticking out to everyone. Honestly, they made Kansas City look like, I hate to say it, but Georgia's offensive line last season. I mean, they couldn't run, they couldn't pass protect, and I just think that you look at that and you're reminded that it was about the dirty work at Georgia. These are guys that they didn't all have huge flashy numbers, and it started with Trayvon Walker, number 1 overall pick, didn't have big numbers at Georgia. And you look at Jalen Carter early on, didn't have big numbers. None of these guys just came in and had 15 sacks or, just set SEC records at Georgia, but they played, their role in a dominant defense and continued that. They came to Philly and said, I know how to play assignment football. I am not worried about my numbers. I am just here, to help win football games. And that's part of the eval process, to where you have to look past the fact that they didn't have, just the numbers that pop off the screen to you, and know that they have the physical talent that you're looking for. I think that's why the Eagles just were able to dominate in that setting. It's because they're just not worried about padding their stats. They're just worried about winning football games, which is what Kirby Smart's always tried to get across. And I think I do think that now with all the free agents, though, they're going to be asking these guys to do a lot more next year. And I just think that Nolan Smith is set up for a huge 2025 season.
Can be fascinated to watch him. And as entertaining as he is to watch during the game, he delivers in the post game too. Wanted to play this clip from Sky Sports of Nolan, obviously excited after the Super Bowl, had a message he wanted to share about his defensive coordinator.
All I got to do is say shout out to Big Fangio, man. That man, I know he old, but man, he got so much knowledge up in there, and I can't wait to just take it from him and just take all the knowledge that he could give to the game, man. He's an amazing coach.
Ben, we try in this business not to play favorites, and especially when they're like with the team that we're following and we're covering. But I don't know about you, man. Nolan is at probably the top of my list of guys I want to see succeed at the next level. He's one of my favorites.
Well, I don't know how many championships in all Nolan Smith is going to win by the time that his football career is complete. He's at 3 now if you're just counting national championships and Super Bowls. I think the montage of his post-game clips after winning championships has a chance to be one of the greatest cut-ups, one of the best post-championship highlight videos anyone's ever had. He always seems to have something that he says that goes viral, that has people just getting all excited. He's a fun guy. We said it before we even came on here. He is one of the easier players in the world that you've ever covered to root for, because of just the way that he is about things, the way that he treats other people, obviously the way that he plays football. I mean, you brought up the story about Howie Roseman and his conversation there when he passes the phone over to Nick Sirianni. Nick Sirianni said something that I found fascinating. It's like he's taking a guy as an edge rusher in the first round of the NFL draft, and he says, "I'm sorry that you had to wait so long," which tells you what Nick Sirianni and the Eagles thought of Nolan Smith, that he's going at 31. And they're sorry that it had to take them so long. And their only justification for it is, hey, we're taking one of your other guys from Georgia as well before you, so we didn't have any other choice. But Nolan's response is like, I want to reassure you, like I promise you, again, paraphrasing, but I'm not a soft football player. And I think that he understood maybe some of the stereotypes that came in about his game just because of his measurables, and that he was like, I'm self-aware enough to know what my limitations are or where people might think I'm not sound enough as a football player. And I appreciate you for seeing through that, but I want to reassure you that I also recognize all of those things, and everything that I know that I'm capable of doing as a football player, I'm going to do. And I think, again, 2020 hindsight, you listen back to that conversation with Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni, and it's like, man, this sounds like, he was reading the future. You knew what was going to happen with his career early on, but it's just crazy to see it play out. Nolan Smith just always seems to have a sixth sense with those type of things. Also, shout out conducting that interview, Grady Sports grad Olivia Harlan, conducting that post-game interview with Nolan Smith. I would be remiss if I didn't bring that up as well.
Nailed it. I thought it was her, but I wasn't 100% sure. So, Ben, good job pointing that out. And yeah, I mean, the thing that is as exciting as anything, if you're an Eagles fan, if you want to see those guys succeed, these guys are still going to be competing for Super Bowls in these next few years. The Eagles have to be seen as one of the championship favorites in the years to come. Speaking of championship favorites, let's talk about the 2025 Georgia Bulldogs. We're about a month away from the start of spring practice. I wanted to pass along some nuggets, some intel that I have gotten in the last few days as they continue through winter workouts, as they wait for spring practice to start. People on the board were like, man, why do you keep getting stuff on the receivers? I think that speaks to how excited people are about this receiver room, especially after a 2024 group that was a little underwhelming, that struggled, especially with drops. I've heard great things about Zachariah Branch from the people that I was talking to. Kind of got the sense that they feel like he's ahead of what they expected for a transfer. And that makes Zachariah Branch someone worth watching closely during spring practice, because it makes me think about 2 years ago when Dominic Lovett kind of did the same thing, that they felt like he was really ahead of the game when he got to Georgia from Missouri. So good things about Zachariah Branch. Heard good things about Talon Taylor. The word I kind of got was we're going to have to see how physical he is, because he's not the biggest receiver. But I think that you look on our board the last few weeks and we talk about, freshmen we expect to step up, guys who could play big roles. Talon Taylor is a guy that gets brought up quite a bit. Now, this other name, and Ben, I'm going to set you up to talk about this, that I was told was really impressing, was Tyler Williams. And I think that Tyler is a guy that, sometimes gets overlooked. We're talking about a 2025 receiver group. Georgia signs 5 of them, and Tyler Williams isn't one of the higher rated ones among them. But I've heard really good things about Tyler Williams, and specifically how physical he plays. When you talk about a freshman receiver, being willing to hit, being willing to block is a huge piece of getting yourself onto the field. So, Ben, just tell folks what you know about Tyler Williams. He's a guy that we talked to back on that National Signing Day show, and based on what I'm hearing, it seems like he's really representing himself well as he gets ready for his freshman season.
Well, I think a big reason we hear about receivers a lot this time of year too is because one of the more frequent things that they're able to even do are throwing sessions and just getting some work and things like that. So anytime there's eyes on that, there's likely to be some buzz that comes from that. And I think that people are always going to be intrigued by the freshmen because they're the new guys. And again, this was a super talented 2025 recruiting class at receiver that I think people are optimistic have a chance to change the impact and culture that they can have on this receiver room. You know, Tyler Williams, a guy that's smooth in and out of his break, super savvy guy, just on and off the field. Like, I think that his intelligence level is going to be brought up by any person that you've ever talked to about him. His coaches, James Coley mentioned it first thing when I was talking to him down at the Sugar Bowl. Like, he's a super, super savvy dude, and I think that that's going to help him be ready earlier than some other guys are. But again, I could see any and all. I mean, we haven't even mentioned CJ Wiley yet either. It's like I could see any and all of these receivers, Landon Roldan, having some kind of early impact. And, the same can be said for the transfers that are newcomers as well. There's a reason that Georgia went and tried, brought in 5 signees in the 25 class and went and got 2 really productive, successful in other big leagues or within the same leagues guys in the transfer portal at receiver. It's because they knew they needed an upgrade. They knew they needed an overhaul, and they felt really strongly about all of these guys to be able to have an immediate impact.
And when you look to the fall, Thomas Blackshear as well is going to be someone who's going to try to get in the mix. Kipp, what do you think just about this entire receiver room? Again, felt like this group underwhelmed in 2024, but new faces with transfers like Zachariah Branch, with Noah Thomas. You're hoping to get Colby Young back. You've got Dylan Bell back. And then we've got 5 freshmen that we're talking about now that all of them are going to try to get in the mix as well.
I mean, I think it's just no excuses at this point because we just talked about last season about the inconsistencies from the wide receiver position and the fact that they were never really able to get it going. And you mentioned Zachariah Branch. I think that the comparison to Dominic Lovett when he came in is a great one because that's my expectation. My projection is that Zachariah Branch has a very similar season to what Lovett had in 2023. That is to say, I think he's going to have 50-plus catches and over 600 yards receiving. You can't projecting touchdowns is tough. If I was going to say who's going to lead Georgia in touchdowns, I mean, my first and second guess would be Noah Thomas. I just think that he's set up to be that guy that just makes a lot of plays in the red zone. Even knowing that, that Georgia has an extremely talented tight end room, I just think that Noah's skill set will be one that Mike Bobo takes advantage of early and often. And I think that's really where, you look at this wide receiver room and they have very diverse skill sets. They're guys that I think are going to be able to switch around and cross train. And when people ask like who's going to be the X, who's going to be the Z, I look at Noah Thomas and I'm like, you can play him anywhere. I mean, you can play him at all 3 positions. He should be able to really help you. And I think that is going to help Dylan Bell most of all, because he spent all last year trying to just fix into one position. And the results were they were disappointing based on what we all thought he was going to be able to do. And I think now when you have other guys in there that can play varied roles and you don't have to just pigeonhole him into one specific spot, you can take advantage of his skill set more and use him in a way that allows him to make plays with the ball in space, which is what he does best. And so I just think there is a trickle-down effect. And when you have the young guys coming in, they're going to have to earn their playing time. But I don't think it's going to be like in previous years where everyone's yelling, why isn't this guy on the field? Why isn't this guy on the field? I think, between CJ Wiley and I think Talon Taylor as well, and Tyler Williams, I think these guys are going to get on the field early and often for Georgia. And I think it's just going to be, really a jolt in this offense to have young playmakers, but also just have talented playmakers from top to bottom to where you're not wondering, where is the production going to come from? Where is the separation going to come from? Where are the red zone weapons? I think they have those guys in this room now to where they can utilize the entire playbook. They can put everybody in situations to make plays that goes with their skill set. And I just think that every single week you're probably going to have a different guy just, having a big breakout game. And that still might not result in, 1,000-yard receiver, but I do think it's going to result in having, a lot of big time playmakers and a more explosive offense for Georgia, which really, again, last year it was not fun to watch for the fan base. I think they're going to get back to that this year, and they're going to throw the ball around and get the ball to a lot of different playmakers. And I think that was the goal of this offseason. Let's rework this position room and let's set our quarterbacks up so that they're not out there having to do way too much and force the ball in, and the result, turnovers, injuries, bad things happened because they didn't have the guys they needed in that room.
I will also add on the other side of the ball, a lot of what we hear this time of year, I think, is based on winter workouts and how guys are looking. So a lot of the athletic types, I think, are really going to shine this time of year. Andrew Ivins brought it up on the last recruiting episode about Chris Cole, and just he's looked freakish in some of the videos that Georgia's put out. I will also know I've heard some really positive things about Nasir Johnson. I know that we've talked on the defensive line how thin it is right now. This is a guy that I witnessed with my own eyes doing backflips at 295 pounds. I don't know what he's going to play at, but he's someone that I know when he was coming in, there was a discussion about him serving some of that nose tackle role. And I think that if he bulked up to that 320, 325 range, and he's still moving the way it sounds like he is in some of these winter workouts, just tuck it away for later. I think Nasir Johnson is someone that is going to make a lot bigger of an impact on this 2025 season than I maybe would have guessed a few months ago.
And Nasir's a guy that I think there was a lot of excitement about before his freshman season, and he had a foot injury early in the year, and it just kind of seemed like he couldn't really make the impact that we all thought. So I think that is worth paying attention to Nasir Johnson, because this is a defensive line that needs 2 or 3 different guys to step up, along with some of the more established guys, especially in the interior. Well, like I mentioned, guys, we're about a month away from the start of spring practice, and I wanted to ask each of you guys to give me one Bulldog that when we get to spring practice, you're really going to be paying attention to. And I'll start first since I'm posing the question. And I'm going to say Roderick Robinson, because I feel really good about Nate Frazier as the lead back. He was Georgia's leading rusher this past season as a true freshman, but they're going to need other guys involved. And I feel like you've seen flashes of Roderick and you've seen the potential, but he's just not been able to stay healthy. I think he had a high ankle sprain as a freshman, had the foot injury before the season last year. Frankly, we were surprised to see him play at all, and he got involved in November and then got hurt again. So to me, Roderick has a great opportunity to be that number 2 back, but he's got to stay healthy, and he's got to show that he's capable and can be counted on. And I think a big piece of that will be what's something worth watching during spring practice. Ben, is there one Bulldog that you're really interested in watching closely, a guy that once spring practice starts, you're going to be paying attention to?
It's going to be a lazy answer. It's technically 2 people, but I mean, Ryan Puglisi and Gunnar Stockton. I mean, I think this is the first real quarterback battle that Georgia is going to have had since 2021. And I realize that, I mean, I know that Carson had to win a battle to do it, but I think that it was more or less a foregone conclusion that he was the most talented guy in the room and was going to get that job. So, I am interested to see what Georgia looks like in a quarterback battle. I realize Gunnar Stockton has some built-in advantages because of his time spent, because of the fact that he just started a playoff game. But I do think that there is going to be a look at who makes the most sense for now and for the future. And I know anytime that there are eyes on Georgia practices this spring, I don't know how often that's going to be, but whenever there are, there's going to be a lot of attention placed on what those quarterbacks are doing. So I do think it's a lazy answer because, of course, the quarterbacks are something that you're going to take a look at. But I just find it fascinating. I mean, really, since JT Daniels, Stetson Bennett, Carson Beck in 2021, I haven't felt like Georgia could it go one way or the other at quarterback in quite some time. Now, if Gunnar ends up winning the job, it may not look that way in retrospect, but I just feel like it's going to play out a little bit differently this spring in terms of how close that battle is going to be.
That's sort of my question is if they really give Puglisi the opportunity, which they should, but we'll just have to track it during spring practice and to see what it looks like. Kipp, what about you? Is there a Bulldog that you'll really be paying attention to during spring ball?
Gabe Harris. I think that you look at this defense and, with Damon Wilson leaving, I think I want to see what specifically that edge position looks like. So if not Gabe, I mean, Quintavious Johnson, it's you hear about him. You all the reports are this guy's the next big thing. The time is now. I mean, we still think that they're going to look at any options in the portal, but nothing's guaranteed. You don't know that there's going to be a guy available in the portal that's going to be an impact guy. And maybe it's a depth guy, so sure, they're probably going to add someone, but you can't just, mark them down for a guy that's going to be a known starter at the edge position because one, those guys just don't go in the portal, and two, everyone's going to be lining up if you get that kind of guy in the portal, just like everyone was lined up immediately for Damon Wilson. So I think that just that position specifically, they're going to be asking Gabe to do a lot. We think it'll be similar to Michael Williams, where he's probably playing some at defensive end, probably playing some at edge. What does that look like? And then, what does Quintavious Johnson bring to the field as a starter? What does that look like for Georgia? Is this a group that you can depend on to bring consistent pressure? Because, that Buckus Award winner's gone too. So at this point, are you using your inside linebackers to generate pressure as well? Is Raylan Wilson going to step into that role? So I just want to see where this pass rush is going to come from because last season you kind of knew. Like I said, you knew that you had first-round talent at multiple positions, and they, for the most part, they used those guys fairly well. Once you had them all on the field together, Jalen Walker, Michael Williams, they looked pretty strong together, but they're gone. So what's the next group look like? And so that's really just that position. I'm just fascinated. And the fact that it took me to now to realize, oh yeah, Chaz Chambliss is gone. The guy was, the number 2 disruptor for most of the season. And I think, the Chaz haters are, can now retire. Don't have to worry about it anymore. But that's a lot of production as well that they have to replace. He was a damn good football player for Georgia. So I just want to see, what does this Gabe Harris look like? Is he going to be an edge? Is he going to be a defensive end? Is he a hybrid guy? Is he playing at 255, 260? I'm just fascinated to see what the package looks like and how they're faring in practice.
I think there's big opportunity with that edge position, and we'll see who's able to rise to the occasion during these 15 practices in March and April. We're going to take a quick break, come back, talk about Georgia basketball, sort of where they are in this NCAA tournament race, and then we're going to preview Georgia baseball. All right, guys, time for an extended Georgia men's basketball minute. We're going to kind of take a look at where the Bulldogs are in this race to try to make the NCAA tournament for the first time in 10 years. Georgia now 16-8, 4-7 in SEC play. Lost a tough one, 76-75 at home against Mississippi State. Wouldn't necessarily say that was a must-win, but it would have helped tremendously as they try to put a stamp on their postseason hopes, to try to get to, I think, at least 7 SEC wins. Again, they're at 4 right now. Looking at some of the projections, the bracketology on Tuesday, which, again, this can change very quickly. Joe Lunardi from ESPN has Georgia as one of his last 4 in to the NCAA tournament. He's got Georgia, San Diego State, Wake Forest, and BYU and he's got Georgia and San Diego State playing as part of the first four. Jerry Palm from CBS Sports, very similar spot. Georgia right now as one of his last four in. He has them with Georgia. It's Georgia, San Diego State, Arkansas, and Texas. And this would be pretty entertaining, Georgia and Texas as part of the first four. And then looked over at teamrankings.com. I like some of the statistics they have there. Also has Georgia as an 11 seed. But they have Georgia right now with an 84% chance to make the tournament, projecting Georgia to go into the SEC tournament with a 19-12 record, which would mean that Georgia ended up with 7 SEC wins, as I think they really need. Ben, what do you make of where Georgia finds itself right now? Are you hitting the panic button when it comes to the NCAA tournament? What's sort of the path ahead in your mind for Georgia?
I mean, it's a difficult road to make the tournament. There's no doubt about that. I mean, you have to start – we've done this, song and dance already. Like, you have to figure out what are the wins that you can kind of count on. And we've been talking for a while, like Mississippi State at home is not going to be an easy one. It's another one that I know is going to frustrate a lot of people, and everyone's going to be real – down on the basketball team right now because they lost by 1 at home. It was tough. It's one that you definitely want to win, but as long as you find a way to win, I mean, they got to get 3, maybe 4 more wins around the rest of the year. I mean, Jerry Palm has Georgia playing Texas in that play-in game. If you could go on the road and beat Texas, that might solve all that problems of having to play in a game like that. Like, I think that because you lose at home to Auburn and because you lose at home to Mississippi State, and I think you look ahead and say the Florida one, the way Florida's playing right now, I think is going to be a significant challenge. It's been a long time since Florida's lost a basketball game to Georgia. That dates back to Mike White being the head coach over there. So I don't think that's one that you can really count on. Missouri this weekend becomes a large one. I think splitting one of Mississippi State and Missouri was going to be a tall task, and you kind of had to do it. That comes up this weekend. You got to find a way to win that one. Got to find a way to beat South Carolina. Got to find a way to beat Vanderbilt. If you get 3-4, I think Georgia is still in an okay place. If you look at the net rankings, you look at some of the predictive, measurables with Ken Palm in terms of what they're going to look like in these games moving forward. Like, I think they will have an opportunity in the SEC tournament to play a team that they should win. That will probably be the one where everyone has the conversation like, all right, I think this clinches Georgia's spot. But you've got work that you have to do in the regular season. Like, you can't drop a game that you can't lose to Vanderbilt at this point. Like, you can't lose to South Carolina at this point. That becomes really difficult. But I do think I look at that one on the road at Texas as like, if Georgia can go on the road and win at Texas, it's not going to be an easy thing to do, but I think that does sort of change the view of Georgia because they went on the road. I mean, I think Georgia's 1-5 on the road right now this season. There's not I know they won a big game in neutral site against St. John's, which is going to look great, but I do think you start looking at how did Georgia look away from home, and they dropped a couple that you wouldn't have wanted them to lose at home. It starts making the case a lot harder when it comes to the resume.
1-5 on the road, that one win against Georgia Tech, which is not a great Georgia Tech team, but 0-5 on the road in SEC play. They will pick it back up, try to get to 1-5 in SEC play on the road at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday night against Texas A&M. And Ben, you hit on the games that I think, if we're saying they're getting 3 more, that I think they need. At home on Saturday against Missouri, at South Carolina, at home against Vanderbilt, that Vanderbilt game being the regular season finale. I'm not convinced they can win at Texas. I think a big piece of that is what we were just talking about. They do not play well away from home, and Texas has played pretty well here lately. Don't see them winning at Auburn. Don't see them beating Florida at home. I think you really need 3 to feel pretty good about your chances, not only because of the grand scheme of things, but you also have to consider what was part of this conversation. A team like Texas is going to be part of this bubble talk too. Arkansas is still kind of hanging around, and Arkansas beat you. You don't have the benefit of the head-to-head. And I'm someone who's really hesitant to think that a deep SEC tournament run is really going to matter. I mean, we've seen years where they just the committee kind of throws out what happened in Nashville. I think about the year Texas A&M, I think, played for the championship, didn't win, and wound up getting left out of the tournament. So if you can do more work on the front end as far as what you do in the regular season, I think that's a huge benefit. You do not want to be putting all your chips on hey, if we make a deep SEC tournament run, that'll get us in. Kipp, what are your thoughts? I'll start too. You were at the game against Mississippi State. What did you take away from that? And then just bigger picture, what you think of where Georgia is right now?
Yeah, I was not prepared to see Georgia get out physical, on the glass the way they were against Mississippi State. I thought that looking at that game and the Missouri game, I felt the Mississippi State game was probably the better of the two coin flips, which is how I see both games. I think Missouri is going to be the same way. Comes down to the last possession, 1 point game. I kind of like Missouri a little bit in that one. So I just think that, Georgia needs to get healthy because we don't really know, when they're going to have Dakota LeFew. I thought that I really was impressed by him. And then, when will Tyron Lawrence be back? That one seems pretty tough, but I think that it was a devastating way to lose the game, but the environment was outstanding. I think that the crowd, just the overall game experience, is night and day from what I've seen in the past. And I think that, Silas Demery, it's a tough way to lose a game. He's had a couple of those at the end of the game, but there's no time for him to think about that. And they're going to put a lot on him in these next couple of games. They're going to ask him to do a lot. And I think he's also going to need to lean on his teammates a lot. I think Blue Cane is really set up to kind of have a big run here. Really liked how he played against South Carolina. I think that's just, they get that version of Blue Cane the next couple of games. I think it'll bode really well for Georgia overall. And I think that, again, as frustrating as that game was, I just think that's exactly the kind of, improvement that you just need to see. Like you need to see them win one, that kind of close game. You need to see them prove, like you guys said, they can win on the road. I'm not sure they get more than one more road win than the rest of the season. I think that South Carolina game, as you guys said, the 2 games in the season can be seen as a positive. Let's say they only win 2, then they at least have some momentum going into the tournament, knowing that, hey, you probably need to win 2 games in the tournament to have a shot as well. So I still think it sets up well, but man, they get these next 5 games, upset someone, give yourself a better chance going into the last week of the season. And I still think that the margin for error is almost nothing now, but hey, let's just play with house money and see if you can pull an upset off and gain some confidence, because that's really toward the end of the games last season. It kind of felt similar that they didn't have anyone that felt like they could take the game over and know they can win. You got Ace Newell out there. You got a future lottery pick out there who's averaging over 16 points per game as of late. Let him just take over the game toward the end. Start feeding him, knowing that he's an elite shooter, he's an elite player, and he's not really worried about like expectations or anything. You just know that he's the best player on the court almost every night. So that's a situation where I think they need to get him the ball way more late in games. I was shocked how long it took for him to get a rebound in that game. That again, that's the thing that surprised me. I think he needs to go ahead and know that I'm as talented as anyone else in the court, and I can play like that, especially on the boards, because they need to steal those extra possessions any way they can.
Yeah, he did not have a rebound in the first half of that game against Mississippi State, which was just unreal. And to Kipp's point too, those last few possessions, the ball never ended up in Ace's hands, and I thought that was a mistake. I will say Silas played a great game, 23 points, very productive, and that turnover late was his only turnover, which really stinks, but that's just sort of the way it breaks. Again, the injury point that Kipp brought up, Dakota LeFew out, Tyron Lawrence out for Tuesday's game at Texas A&M, 9 p.m. Eastern time on SEC Network. Going to be a very, very tough task to beat the number 8 team in the country. We're going to switch it over to Georgia baseball. Georgia is getting ready this weekend to start its 2025 season, the second under Wes Johnson, playing Quinnipiac and also playing UNC Wilmington to kick off the 2025 season. We brought on Olivia Sayer, who is smarter than us. She's in class right now, so she's actually learning something, doing something productive with her Tuesday afternoon. But sat down with Olivia, who is going to cover Georgia baseball for Dogs 24/7 this spring. Picked her brain a little bit about this baseball team, what she's expecting, and this is what she had to share. All right, we're going to do a little Georgia baseball talk here. We got Olivia Sayer with us. First off, Olivia, welcome to the Junkyard Dawgcast. Your first of what I think will be many experiences, but we get ready for baseball season. It's almost here. A lot of excitement about this Georgia baseball team. And I'll start here, Olivia. This is a team, in Wes Johnson's first year, very successful, 43 wins, hosted a super regional. What are sort of the expectations around this program going into a new year?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Super excited for this season. And honestly, I think that's kind of just the mentality within the team. It really is an Omaha or bust mentality. And it's crazy because you look at last season where Wes Johnson, he came in, I believe the team was 29-27 the year before. So we kind of had to instill that confidence within them, make them think they could get to Omaha. Whereas this year, that seems to be the expectation.
Now, looking at the lineup first, no Charlie Condon, no Corey Collins. Those are two big bats that have moved on. When you look at the lineup, who are the guys you feel like have to step up or are sort of seen as the top hitters for this team?
Yeah, so that's definitely something that a lot of the members of the team have talked about, just who's going to fill those shoes. And they've honestly all said that whoever's in the batter's box is going to be their best hitter. But some guys that I'm looking at, obviously Trey Phelps, the freshman year he had last year. Wes Johnson mentioned that he kind of could become that Charlie Condon, win that Golden Spikes, and he'll probably get drafted after this year as well. And then Nolan McCarthy is a guy that they brought in from Kentucky, and it took him about a month, maybe 3, to become the team leader. So he's definitely well respected. Then a couple of other guys in the outfield, Robbie Burnett had an incredible year at UNC Asheville last year. Devin Obie is probably going to be playing alongside him. And then Slate Alford and Colby Branch returning is going to be massive. They're two guys, I think a lot of people thought they were going to go MLB afterwards. And Slate especially had an opportunity to sign with an MLB team, but decided to come back because he has a chip on his shoulder, because he wants this team to go to Omaha. And so I believe him and Colby Branch are going to be big for this team as well.
Now you look at the pitching. What do you sort of expect from the rotation? Who are some of the names to know when it comes to Georgia's pitchers?
Yeah, so Colton Smith, Leighton Finley, big returners, going to be your Friday, your Saturday night starters. And then just a lot of transfers. One guy that Wes Johnson's pointed to in particular is Zach Brown. He had a 4.22 ERA with Ohio State last season. I think a lot of people, myself included, thought he was going to come in, maybe be a back-end starter, potentially even close. But Wes Johnson seems to like him as a starter, or a back-end reliever and potentially close. But Wes likes him as a starter. And so another guy, Alton Davis, is someone that they're stretching out. Wes said they're not going to limit him to just one role, so we could see him closing, we could see him starting, we could see him coming in the middle, long relief. Then a couple other guys, JT Quinn is another one. He played for Ole Miss last year, and he's been starting Alton Davis opposite in scrimmages, so I think he's going to get a lot of time.
So you've had some time around this team. You covered this team last season. Going into 2025, what is your biggest question? What is something that you kind of want to learn once these games get going for Georgia?
Yeah, I just want to see how the starting lineup shakes out, and I think it's going to be something. It's not going to be the same every single game. That's something that Wes really emphasized, is that he said everybody except for Colby Branch and Henry Hunter are probably going to play different positions. And so just seeing how that shakes out, seeing you don't have Corey at the top anymore, you don't have Charlie right behind him. So how is that going to align? And then also defensively, what is this team going to look like? They brought in Nick Emirati from Kentucky. He was Kentucky's hitting coach, really solid defensively. That's definitely an area Georgia can improve upon. You just look at a lot of the infield defense from last season. It could use a lot of improvement.
Now, it seems like when we've talked about SEC men's basketball, just the competition level and the margin for error is so small. And just looking at baseball this season, to me, it seems like you'll see something very similar. just from what you can kind of tell and the talk leading into the season, who are those teams that you're kind of watching as the teams to beat that Georgia's going to be going up against on these weekends?
Yeah, well, the obvious one, and Georgia actually ends its regular season with it, Texas A&M, ranked number 1 in a lot of the polls, new head coach, but a lot of returning players, so they're definitely going to be up there. Arkansas is another one. You look at that pitching rotation, especially its Friday and Saturday night starters, probably can go up with the best. And then, of course, the SEC has the reigning national champion, Tennessee. So there's really not going to be a week off in this league. Wes Johnson called it the best conference in America, and for good reason.
Yeah, I think you win any of these series for any of these teams, it's going to be a real accomplishment. Now, Olivia, we're having you on now because Georgia's going to start their season this weekend, going to Quinnipiac. Got non-conference play for about the next month before that first series against Kentucky. What do you want to learn about this team over non-conference play? What sort of intrigues you about what you'll be watching for once these games get underway?
Yeah, the main thing I'm going to be watching is just how does this pitching shake out? I think looking from last season into this season, there's no question that the offense is going to be there. You're going to have guys hitting home runs. You're going to score runs. It's a matter of can Georgia limit the other team, which was really its biggest problem last season. And you look at all the guys they brought in through the portal. I touched on some of them with your JT Quinn, Alton Davis. Another one is Brian Curley. He's going to be huge in that rotation. I believe his ERA was 2.87 with VCU last year. So just where do all of these guys fit in is going to be my biggest question that Georgia's going to try to solve over non-conference play.
Now, I'm sure we'll talk about this more as the spring goes on and when you pop up on the show, but I know you're a big Braves fan. Are you optimistic? How are you feeling? We still got a little ways before spring training gets underway.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting season. I think I'm a little concerned that they didn't sign any more pitchers than they did, especially with Fried gone. You look at Morton gone, Minter's gone, which I think is going to be a massive loss. Joe Jimenez, I think it's going to miss the season with an injury. So little concern on the pitching. And then offensively, I think Profar is going to be a good addition, but do wish we would have done a little bit more there, especially when you look at Travis d'Arnaud's gone.
Yeah, fingers crossed. It's going to be tough, but they found ways to win even last year when pretty much everybody got hurt. Well, Olivia, I appreciate you popping on. I know there's a lot of people on the Junkyard that are very excited, not only to have you on board, but to be having good Georgia baseball coverage and looking at a very exciting season. I do want to give you this opportunity. Let people know where they can follow you, how they can keep up with you and the Georgia baseball team this season.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Olivia K. Sayer, spelled as it is on the screen, but also just I'll be on the message board. I'll be posting articles, so just be sure to check out Dawgs 24/7.
Shout out to Olivia. Very excited to see her Georgia baseball coverage this year and to follow along with, again, what's going to be a very, very entertaining season and could be a very productive one for Wes Johnson and company. We're getting ready to close this one out. I did want to bring this up since we were talking about the Super Bowl. Not going to talk about the halftime show. Don't want to start a fight between all of us on here, but I did want to talk about the commercials. I felt on the whole they were kind of underwhelming, nothing too crazy, but I'll start with you, Ben. Did you have a favorite Super Bowl commercial this year?
Honestly, you're way overestimating my memory and attention to detail on things like that. Like even historically, I'm bad with remembering some of the best Super Bowl commercials. It does feel like I'll use this as an opportunity, even though you didn't ask for this, to make just a general complaint. I think that the film industry just hasn't been as creative for a long time. There's, big money, easy, you're going to make millions and millions of dollars off this type of film. So I think the movie industry just has been lazier through the years. Just my opinion. I know you might have a different viewpoint on that, Jordan, but I think that's probably bled over to the commercial industry as well. Just feel like the thought processes and the creativity that goes into these types of things just aren't what they used to be. I know it's going to sound old man yells at cloud, and it is.
Speaking of old man yelling at clouds, Kipp, did you have a favorite commercial?
I did not watch any of the commercials. I just muted the TV, went to Twitter to see how social media was reacting. I refused to even give it any meaning because the second I even look, I feel like my phone at this point just tracks what I see, and I just start getting like Lay's ads all on my phone. We're just at the point where everything is so just connected to everything. So yeah, I saw more social media reaction than the actual ads. I will say though, I mean, I liked, you know, Elmo's presence on social media and the ad. I think him and Roger Federer just, you know, doing the on running shoes, the letters of the day. I'm a big Elmo fan in general, so I connected with that. I know it started. I wasn't able to mute it in time, but the first commercial I believe was the Dunkin' Donuts with Ben and Casey Affleck. So you know that one was fine. I'm a huge coffee person, so even though I don't drink, you know, I'm not a Dunkin' coffee drinker per se. I like that commercial as well. So that's the only ones I could really remember. And I just think that that's kind of where we're at. Is that we're not the memorable ads. I think we're just, you know, we've seen it all at this point, and I just think we're desensitized to like an ad actually catching our eye. And half the time, you know, you think like you start like tearing up, and you know, then you find out it's, you know, a DoorDash ad, or you know, like the ad doesn't match up to the message that's being sent. So yeah, I'm not going to give anyone credit for the ones this year. You have to do better. You have to come much stronger to really make an impact. I just think on the audience these days.
Yeah, Elmo got some people fired up because he tweeted something that was like, I hope both teams have fun. And everyone was like, no, Elmo, I've got my mortgage riding on this game. You can't be doing that.
I mean, I think even Ben would comment that's just pure farming right there. Like, I think that's like, you can't do any better than that. Just be yourself, be Elmo, and let everyone just rage, you know, on you. And it was a perfect setting for Elmo to be completely indifferent and just to say he hopes everyone has fun.
I would say my favorite commercial was the Totino's Pizza Rolls. That was like an ET parody. It's mainly because it was Tim Robinson and Sam Richardson, Detroiters. I think you should leave. Tim Robinson they just dropped a trailer for a movie he's in with Paul Rudd called Friendship, and I'm already like first in line to see it. So it was very stupid, but if you know Detroiters or I think you should leave, I mean, it fell right in line with everything they do. All right, we're going to end the episode right there. I appreciate Kipp and Ben for popping on. Thanks to everyone who watched us live, everyone who is watching or listening to it after the fact. Go to Dawgs 24/7, subscribe. We are, again, a month away from the start of spring practice. What are you laughing at there, Ben?
We'll talk about it after the show.
Can't wait. I know what we're talking about. So go to the YouTube, go to the TikTok, all kinds of good content there. We are going to have a very busy spring practice right around the corner. We're following this Georgia men's basketball team as they try to make the tournament. We've got Georgia baseball coverage, as you saw there with Olivia popping on, and she'll be on future episodes as well. And we're very excited to get this thing going. Do also want to plug on Thursday. We're going to have a NASCAR themed podcast that I've put together. If you guys remember Nate McBride, a linebacker from Georgia, he is now a pit crew member for Noah Gragson's team in the NASCAR Cup Series, the number 4 car with Front Row Motorsports. Had a chance to talk to Nate, talk about his story going to Georgia, how he got involved in NASCAR. I thought it was really interesting. He was not a guy, I just assumed he grew up like a NASCAR fan. No, I mean, this opportunity kind of pops up. Really enjoyed catching up with Nate, learning about that. I would encourage you, even if you're not a NASCAR fan, give this one a listen, give it a watch, because it was really interesting to hear his story. Looking forward to dropping that on Thursday. So we will get out of here on that. For Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.